Commutation readings are made possible thanks to viewers like you. Please visit us at commutationconstruct.locals.com. Memberships are free to start with coupon code CCFREE. Hello and welcome to Commutation Readings. My name is James Derry and I am your host. Today we are continuing reading the Federalist Papers. Finally, we are getting back to it with Federalist Papers number 7. I don't know why this keeps adjusting the size every time I leave the window for it. But yeah, so here we go. Federalist Paper number 7. Continuing the same subject we left off on last time concerning dangers from dissension between the states. I'm glad we're finally getting to continue this. It's been a little while, so yeah, let's just hop on into it. Oh, and I do like this. It actually has the author's names directly on it, so I believe I did want to make a correction before I get into this. These first few ones are all, I believe, Alexander Hamilton. No, the first 3 were John Jay. Okay. Good. Someone was telling me Alexander Hamilton. Okay, so it's only the first one that was Alexander Hamilton. The rest of the Publius were John Jay. And 6 went back to Hamilton. All right. There we go. So, with that slight correction, a little bit of extra info for us, let's continue on knowing that this is Alexander Hamilton. To the people of the state of New York. It is sometimes asked, with an air of seeing triumph, what inducements could the states have, if disunited, to make war upon each other? It would be a full answer to this question to say precisely the same inducements which have, at different times, deluged in blood at all the nations in the world. But, unfortunately for us, the question admits to a more particular answer. There are causes of differences within our immediate contemplation, of the tendency of which, even under the restraints of a federal constitution, we have had sufficient experience to enable us to form a judgment of what might be expected if those restraints were removed. And this is going to be a good, this actually seems like it's going to be a good one to go through, because this is talking about stuff that's dealing with the U.S. basically going to war with itself, and we did have a civil war about 100 years after this, so we have that hindsight to go back with thinking when we read through this. Territorial disputes have at all times been found one of the most fertile sources of hostility among nations. Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars that have desolated the earth has sprung from this origin. This cause would exist among us in full force. We have a vast tract of unsettled territory within the boundaries of the United States. There still are discordant and undecided claims between several of them, and the dissolution of the Union would lay a foundation for similar claims between them all. It is well known that they have heretofore had serious and animated discussions concerning the rights to the lands which were ungranted at the time of the Revolution, and which usually went under the name of Crown lands. The states within the limits of whose colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the Crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all the part of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain, till it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. This, it has been said, was at all events an acquisition to the Confederacy by compact with a foreign power. It has been the prudent policy of Congress to appease this controversy by prevailing upon the states to make cessions to the United States for the benefit of the whole. This has been so far accomplished as, under a continuation of the Union, to afford a decided prospect of an amicable termination of the dispute. A dismemberment of the Confederacy, however, would revive this dispute and would create others on the same subject. At present, a large part of the vacant Western Territory is, by cession at least, if not by any anterior right, the common property of the Union. If that were at an end, the states which made the cession on a principle of federal compromise would be apt, when a motive of the grant had ceased, to reclaim the lands as a reversion. The other states would no doubt insist on a proportion by right of representation. Their argument would be that a grant once made could not be revoked, and that the justice of participating in territory acquired or secured by the joint efforts of the Confederacy remained undiminished. If contrary to probability, it should be admitted by all the states that each had a right to a share of this common stock, there would still be a difficulty to be surmounted as a proper rule of apportionment. Sorry, I've got I'm a little stuffy right now. All right, let's continue. Different principles would be set up by different states for this purpose, and as they would affect the opposite interests of the parties, they might not easily be susceptible of a pacific adjustment. Oh, sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble right now. I don't know what's going on with my allergies today. It's been like this for a few days now. But yeah, so this is a big conversation on the westward expansion beyond the 13 colonies, going west, grabbing more land, trying to see like, hey, if we break up, every state's gonna want like to lay some claim to that, and there's gonna be plenty of arguments that would ensue from it, which is a good argument. It's very fair. Again, I'm not sure it's really. I still wish there was an argument of what would draw the U.S. to separate, but again, we did have the Civil War, where the southern states tried to declare themselves separate from the North in a confederacy. So there's a lot of there's some interesting, I guess, historical. Well, for us, it's a history. For them, it was a future. But there's a lot of historical precedent to kind of like weave different tales about this and how it kind of really related to what was and what they expected, or all these different aspects to it. Continuing, in a wild field of Western territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions, without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. To reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. The circumstances of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania respecting the land at Wyoming admonished us not to be admonished us not to be sanguine in expecting an easy accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation obliged the parties to submit the matter to the decisions of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. But Connecticut gave strong indications of dissatisfaction with that determination, nor did she appear to be entirely resigned to it, till, by negotiation and management, something like an equivalent was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended to convey the slightest censure on the conduct of that state. She no doubt sincerely believes herself to have been injured by the decision, and states, like individuals, acquaintance with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage, acquiesce with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage. Very true. People, no matter what, if something comes out in their disadvantage, they're going to have things to say about it. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy between the states and the District of Vermont. Hold on a sec. Yeah. Sorry, I had to check something. The controversy between this state and the District of Vermont can vouch the opposition we experienced as well from states not interested as from those which were interested in the claim, and can attest the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed had this state attempted to assert its rights by force. Two motives preponderated. They really like to use big words. It's not that hard to say either. It's just like reading it's kind of weird. Two motives preponderated in that opposition. One, a jealousy entertained of our future power, and the other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states who had obtained grants of lands under the actual government of that district. Even the states which brought forward claims in contradiction to ours seemed more solicitous to dismember this state than to establish their own pretensions. These were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. New Jersey and Rhode Island, upon all occasions, discovered a warm zeal for the independence of Vermont and Maryland, till alarmed by the appearance of a connection between Canada and that state, entered deeply into the same views. These, being smaller states, saw with an unfriendly eye the perspective of our growing greatness. In a review of these transactions, we may trance upon the causes which would be likely to embroil the states with each other, if it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. So I like that this one's actually acknowledging that it's not necessarily that that it's guaranteed, but should we disunite, here's a list of issues that could come up. Here's like states that feel like they've already been done wrong. Here's a list of states who are kind of worried about other states and how some of them have connections to Canada, a rival nation at the time. Like there's a lot of reasons for mistrust, essentially. Continuing. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. The states, less favorably circumstanced, would be desirous of escaping from the disadvantages of local situation and of sharing in the advantages of their more fortunate neighbors. Each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions, which would beget discontent. The habits of intercourse on the basis of equal privileges, to which we have been accustomed since the earliest settlement of the country, would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have independent of this circumstance. We should be ready to We should be ready to denominate injuries those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent sovereignties consulting a distinct interest. Interesting. The spirit of enterprise which characterizes the commercial part of America has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved, and it is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. The infractions of these regulations on one side, the efforts to prevent and repel them on the other, would naturally lead to outrages and these to reprisals and wars. So there's a reason for the national government to have a need to be ready to essentially settle disputes, essentially, realizing that the different parties will have distinct interests. They will have justifiable reasons, and they will be willing to do justifiable acts as part of their independence. That's kind of what I'm getting from it. Again, you guys know I like to read through these the first time with you, and I do like to go back and reflect on these readings over time. This is kind of just me, because I've never gone through the Federalist Papers. I wanted to have this experience where you kind of get to see my initial reaction. These are basically reaction videos, but you get to see my initial reaction, my initial take, and we get to kind of grow in a way together. That's kind of my idea for this. So I hope you guys are enjoying some of this stuff, even if it's a little rough around the edges. The opportunities which some states would have... This is worded so awkwardly. The opportunities which some states would have of rendering other tributary to them by commercial regulations would be impatiently submitted to by the tributary states. The relative situation of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey would afford an example of this kind. New York, for the necessities of revenue, must lay duties on her importations. A great part of these duties must be paid by the inhabitants of the two other states in the capacity of consumer of what we import. New York would neither be willing nor able to forego this advantage. Her citizens would not consent that a duty paid to them should be remitted in favor of the citizens of her neighbors, nor would it be practicable. Okay. If there were not this impediment in the way to distinguish the customers in their own markets... I read that a little wrong. Sorry. Would Connecticut and New Jersey long submit to be taxed by New York for her exclusive benefit? Should we be long permitted to remain in the quiet and undisturbed enjoyment of a metropolis from the possession of which we derive an advantage so odious to our neighbors and, in their opinion, so oppressive? Should we be able to preserve it against the incumbent weight of Connecticut on the other side and the cooperating pressure of New Jersey on the other? There are questions that temerity alone will answer in the affirmative. In other words, yeah, there's going to be issues dealing with trade, because if they act fully sovereign, these states are going to tax each other, and ones who are in the middle, like New York, where all the traffic's going through, they're going to make bank off of it. Essentially. The public debt of the Union would be further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. The appointment in the first instance and the progressive extinguishment afterward would be alike productive of ill humor and animosity. How would it be possible to agree upon a rule of apportionment satisfactory to all? This is important. So if they were to break up, how would they split the bill? Because all of them gained their freedom from Great Britain together. They've all had high costs, but they don't all have the same type of income. They don't all have the same way of gaining money. They're not all like states like New York, where tons of commerce is just traveling through it because it's in the middle. Like if you're in Georgia in the South, you also you're not doing big business. You've just got these plantations and stuff. So I mean, you might eventually be doing big business, but you're not like a trade hub. You're an exporter, for the most part. And maybe you have like a few necessities that you import in. So it's not getting that extra money coming in. So you've got states that are going to be poor, states that are going to be far more wealthy. No one's going to be happy with how the bill gets split. All right, let's continue. There is scarcely any that can be proposed which is entirely free from real objections. These, as usual, would be exaggerated by the adverse interests of the parties. There are even dissimilar views among the states as to the general principle of discharging the public debt. Some of them either less impressed with the importance of national credit, or because their citizens have little, if any, immediate interest in the question, feel an indifference, if not a repugnance, to the payment of the domestic debt at any rate. These would be inclined to magnify the difficulties of a distribution. Others of them, a numerous body of whose citizens are creditors to the public beyond proportion of the state in the total amount of the national debt, would be strenuous for some equitable and effective provision. The procrastinations of the former would excite the resentments of the latter. The settlement of a rule would in the meantime be postponed by real differences of opinion and affected delays. The citizens of the United States, interested would clamor. Foreign powers would urge for the satisfaction of their just demands, and the peace of the states would be hazarded to the double contingency of external invasion and internal contention. That is actually that's a very good argument, I think, because once there is internal tension, there's going to be outside influences every time, guaranteed. Like, just look at what the U.S. does around the world. We put influence everywhere, especially wherever there's animosities and like the potential for war. So that is so we can see from our own actions that foreign nations love to interfere to some extent. If they see there's something to gain, they will put their hands in the pocket. So and true, like states are gonna be arguing, how are we gonna pay this? Who's gonna pay what? And in the end, money's gonna be due at a certain time. There's gonna be states that are already paying and states that haven't paid up. And there's going to just be an issue because all the states are kind of on the line for it. So if New York's paying everything off and the states in the South are just like, yeah, no, we don't care. Well, New York is a part of that deal, so they're going to get in trouble too. So there's going to be stuff like that. That's what I'm getting from this. All right. Suppose the difficulties of agreeing upon a rule surmounted and the apportionment made. Still, there is great room to suppose that the rule agreed upon would, upon experiment, be found to bear harder upon some states than upon others. Those which were sufferers by it would naturally seek for a mitigation of the burden. The others would as naturally be disinclined to a revision, which was likely to end in an increase in their own encumbrances. Their refusal would be too plausible a pretext to the complaining states to withhold their contributions, not to be embraced with avidity, and the non-compliance of these states with their engagements would be a ground of bitter discussions and altercations. If even the rule adopted should in practice justify the equality of its principle, still delinquencies in payments on the part of some of the states would result from a diversity of other cases, the real deficiency of resources, the mismanagement of their finances, accidental disorders in the management of the government, and in addition to the rest, the reluctance with which men commonly part with money for purposes that have outlived the exigency. I can't really read that. Exigencies which produce them and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. Delinquencies, from whatever causes, would be productive of complaints, recriminations, and quarrels. There is perhaps nothing more likely to disturb the tranquility of nations than their being bound to mutual contributions for any common objective that does not yield an equal and coincident benefit. People spoke differently back then. That would have been like coincidental or something, written as coincidental these days. But yeah, and coincident benefit. For it is an observation as true as it is trite that there is nothing men differ so readily about as a payment of money. That's pretty funny. Yeah. Everyone spends their money in their own way. So even if they come up with something that people agree upon, either there's going to be some lack of equality in it that's going to drive some parties to get angry, and no one's going to want it. And like the people who have it made aren't going to want to change. The people who are upset are going to stay upset. On the other hand, maybe it is all equitable, but still there's going to be some kind of issues that come with paying it off, should they disunite. That's a good read. All right. Laws in violation of private contracts as they amount to aggressions on the rights of those states whose citizens are injured by them may be considered as another probable source of hostility. We are not authorized to expect that a more liberal or more equitable spirit would preside over the legislations of the individual states hereafter if unrestrained by any additional checks than we have heretofore seen in too many instances disgracing their several codes. We have observed the disposition to retaliation excited in Connecticut in consequence of the enormities perpetrated by the legislature of Rhode Island. Enormities. I need to look that word up. And we reasonably infer that in similar cases, under other circumstances, a war, not of parchment, but of the sword, would chastise such atrocities, breaches of moral obligation, and social justice. Oh, hey! Look at that. The founders were talking about social justice all the way back then. They were way ahead of their times. The probability of incompatible alliances between the different states or confederacies and different foreign nations and the effects of this situation upon the peace of the whole have been sufficiently unfolded in some preceding papers. From the view they have exhibited of this part of the subject, this conclusion is to be drawn that America, if not connected at all, or only by the feeble ties of a simple league, offensive and defensive, would, by the operation of such jarring alliances, be gradually entangled in all of the pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars, and by the destruction, contentions of the parts into which she was divided, would be likely to become a prey to the artifices and machinations of power, equally the enemy of them all. Divide et imperia must be the motto of every nation that either hates or fears us. Let's see if it has down here a little thing for that. Divide and command. Okay, makes sense. So here it has a little note for that. In order that the whole subject of these papers may soon be laid before the public, it is proposed to publish them 4 times a week, on Tuesday in the New York Packet and on Thursday in the Daily Advice. Okay, so that's just them saying when they're going to post the post the papers. I don't know if that's talking about this. That might actually be talking about the original schedule of the Federalist Papers being released. 4 a week. That's a lot. But yeah, so interesting. Divide and command. Anyhow, this is Federalist number 7. I hope you guys have been enjoying this. I mean, I feel like I'm learning some interesting stuff here. I thought it was... I did like this argument about what would happen if the U.S. fell apart. And we can see in many ways how this type of stuff really did come into play with the Civil War. Though I'm wondering what it says that we still had the disunion after they adopted the Constitution, but I guess it wasn't as much of a preventative as they thought, though it has since become a stronger preventative. Though we will see these with how things are these days. But yeah, it's been it's been pretty interesting to read, because we can see that during the Civil War, I believe the French were they were aiding the South, I believe, because the South didn't have the factories to produce the arms or anything like that. They didn't have or I don't know if they were using factories at that point to produce arms, but they didn't have the production of arms as well in the South. They didn't have the money or stuff like that. So I know, I'm pretty sure France was helping them out with that. The North was also getting help too. So it ended up, there was a lot of foreign influence. There was a lot of stuff going on. At the same time, there were policies adopted, even in the North, that would be very questionable under the Constitution, from my understanding. So there's a lot of, because people don't think of themselves as a villain. So sometimes people will go against principle because they think a different principle overrules whatever their acting ones are, and in order to achieve one of their principles, are going to go and do something crazy. And I'm sorry for the lights just reflecting in my glasses. I tried to read this without my glasses on, but my vision has gotten so bad I can't even read my screen right now, and it's literally like arm's length away from me. So you guys are gonna have to kind of deal with the light, unless you rather I just turn this off. The lighting is not great in here, but maybe we'll just have to deal with it being looking kind of orange, despite my room being blue. So I'll try to get another light in here if I can. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's been good trying to get back into this with you guys, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I hope you are too. Anyhow, have a good one. Peace.